Oh, that is just first class. Yeah, that hits the mark. A little racket shake from Yastremska, but debris flying onto the court. And Eala breaks again, a fourth time in this match. Oh, that was something we haven't seen before. Yeah, to the top 50 earlier this year, following a runner-up finish in Linz indoors, no wind. Well watched, those ones can be really tricky.
Yastremska.
Oh! Oh my gosh, that is unbelievable. That one does hit the target. Incredible from Yastremska. That backhand isn't. It's actually the last time she lost a set 6-1. She actually won it this January. That's clever play. So, Alex.
Good morning to sports fans across the United States, and welcome to the absolute, undisputed pinnacle of the spring hardcourt season. You are tuning in to a monumental, high-stakes, completely unmissable edition of our live coverage, broadcasting directly from the breathtaking, sun-scorched, and utterly unforgiving heart of the California desert. The entire global tennis universe has completely descended upon the Coachella Valley, converging at the magnificent, sprawling oasis that is the Indian Wells Tennis Garden for the 2026 BNP Paribas Open. For those of you just waking up across America, pouring your first cup of morning coffee, and settling in for a weekend of world-class gladiatorial sports entertainment, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I need you to understand exactly what you are about to witness today. Let me set the cinematic scene for you right now, because this is not just another routine stop on the grueling, endless professional tennis calendar. This is Indian Wells. This tournament is universally revered, spoken of in hushed, deeply respectful tones in locker rooms from Paris to Melbourne, as the unofficial 5th Grand Slam of the year. It is a legendary, heavily coveted title this event has meticulously, undeniably earned, not merely through its mandatory high-tier status or its staggering, life-changing multi-million-dollar prize purse, but through the sheer, undeniable, suffocating prestige it carries. It is the breathtaking physical setting, framed beautifully by the jagged, towering, snow-capped peaks of the Santa Rosa Mountains looming in the distance. It is the billionaire lifestyle and Hollywood glamour intertwined seamlessly with the absolute brutal, physically devastating nature of these notoriously slow, incredibly high-bouncing, completely unforgiving plexipave hard courts. To win a championship here, to even survive a single agonizing round here in the desert, requires an impossible alchemy of peak physical cardiovascular conditioning, impenetrable, steel-clad mental fortitude, and utterly flawless tactical execution. Today, the blinding white-hot spotlight of the global sporting world narrows its intense, unwavering focus down to a highly anticipated, phenomenally compelling, absolutely explosive second-round clash taking place right now on Court 3. Scheduled for the prime morning window, just as the unforgiving desert sun begins to aggressively bake the acrylic surface and the thin, arid air begins to dangerously swirl, this is a match that practically guarantees to deliver an intoxicating, highly combustible, completely mesmerizing blend of totally contrasting styles, deep-seated, passionate national pride, and immense season-altering, career-defining ranking implications. On one side of the pristine net, we have the explosive, fiercely determined, completely unapologetic Ukrainian powerhouse Dayana Yastremska. On the exact opposite side, representing a historic, completely unprecedented, and deeply emotional rise for Southeast Asian tennis on the global stage, is the 31st seed from the Republic of the Philippines, the brilliant, methodical, and incredibly tactical 20-year-old prodigy, Alex Eala. Let me be absolutely clear. This is not just a tennis match. This is a collision course of epic cinematic proportions. This is a brutal, uncompromising physical and psychological battle between a seasoned, heavy-hitting, terrifyingly powerful veteran desperately seeking a massive career-saving resurgence, and a young, rising superstar who is rapidly, systematically, and brilliantly rewriting the entire tennis history books for her entire nation. To truly understand the visceral, undeniable gravity of this specific matchup, to truly feel the immense crushing weight of every single forehand and the absolute, breathless desperation behind every lunging defensive backhand, we must completely zoom out and deeply examine the sprawling, highly volatile landscape of women's professional tennis in this fiercely competitive season. The professional tour has never, in its entire storied history, been more ruthlessly, unforgivingly demanding. The margins between absolute transcendent glory and devastating heartbreaking defeat have shrunk to microscopic millimeters. Matches are no longer decided by broad strokes, but by split-second, instinctual, lightning-fast decisions made while sprinting at full absolute maximum speed across a gritty, high-friction hard court in the baking, unrelenting, 100-degree desert sun. When Alex Eala steps out from the shadowy, air-conditioned tunnel and into the blinding, sun-drenched expanse of Court 3 today, I need you to understand that she does not walk alone. She carries the immense, towering, almost suffocating hopes, dreams, and profound, passionate expectations of over 115 million Filipinos scattered across the globe. This is a deeply passionate, incredibly proud nation that has historically longed, ached, and desperately waited for a true, undeniable, homegrown global superstar in the incredibly demanding, deeply isolating realm of singles tennis. Allah has not merely answered that distant call. She has absolutely violently shattered the glass ceiling into a million unfixable pieces. Her remarkable, breathtaking journey is a living testament to an uncompromising, relentless, almost terrifying work ethic. From a highly touted, wide-eyed, incredibly gifted junior champion, leaving her family and her home at a remarkably tender age, flying completely across the world to hone her craft under the intense, exacting, brutally hot Spanish sun at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, to becoming a thoroughly established, highly respected, profoundly feared seeded player at a premier global event, Eala's evolution has been nothing short of spectacular. She brings an elite, highly sophisticated, incredibly heavy left-handed shot-making capability that is an absolute waking nightmare for right-handed opponents to decipher and defend against. She comes into Indian Wells riding a massive, surging, unstoppable wave of momentum that has been steadily, forcefully building since the very first week of January. We all watched in absolute awe as she reached the semifinals in Auckland, showcasing a brand new, highly aggressive, completely fearless mindset. We saw her make deep, incredibly impressive, highly physical quarterfinal runs at both the Abu Dhabi Open and the highly prestigious, totally loaded Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships just a few short weeks ago. She has been playing with a kind of liberated, intoxicating confidence, a deeply earned swagger that only comes from knowing, deep down in your very bones, that you unequivocally, undeniably belong at the absolute pinnacle of this grueling sport. Eala, currently sitting at a career-defining, completely validated, historically significant world ranking of 32, received a highly coveted, deeply earned first-round bye in what is remarkably her third consecutive main draw appearance at a premier event this season alone. Conversely, Dayana Yastremska's imposing, terrifying physical presence in this tournament represents a completely different, yet equally compelling, profoundly moving, and deeply heartbreaking kind of resilience. Hailing from the historic, beautiful, and currently embattled port city of Odessa, Ukraine, Yastremska competes every single day under a heavy, unimaginable, completely suffocating emotional and psychological burden. You have to truly, deeply understand the complex, agonizing psychology of this young woman. Every single time she laces up her shoes, meticulously grips her racket, and steps onto the global stage, she is playing for something infinitely, vastly larger than simple ranking points, shiny trophy hardware, or massive prize money checks. She is representing a proud, defiant, unbroken nation that has been locked in a devastating, heartbreaking, entirely destructive conflict for years. She is a walking, breathing, violently striking symbol of Ukrainian strength, endurance, and unyielding survival. Let us not forget for a single second exactly who we are talking about here. She is a multiple-time tour champion. This is a woman who completely captured the imagination of the sporting world with a remarkable, awe-inspiring, wildly aggressive run to the semifinals of the Australian Open. Yastremska possesses a game built from the ground up on unapologetic, breathtaking, relentless, almost frightening aggression. When she is striking the ball cleanly, When her intricate footwork is precise and her kinetic timing is perfectly dialed in, her raw, terrifying, blinding power is capable of completely, systematically overwhelming almost anyone on the entire professional circuit. However, her current campaign has been fraught with complex, incredibly frustrating, deeply demoralizing challenges. It has been heavily marked by a string of early, painful, agonizing exits across the grueling Middle East and Australian swings. She has intensely battled her own mechanics. She has battled creeping self-doubt, and she has battled the sheer, unadulterated physical and mental exhaustion of the traveling tour. Yet it is precisely in the face of this crushing adversity that true, undeniable champion character is violently revealed. Her opening round victory here in the dry California desert against China's highly capable, deeply experienced Zhang Shuai sent a loud, unmistakable, echoing message throughout the women's locker room. Dayana Yastremska has finally definitively found her footing. She has completely dialed in her devastating flat ground strokes. She has perfectly calibrated her explosive booming serve, and she is incredibly, undeniably, terrifyingly dangerous. She dismantled her opponent in a commanding, completely authoritative, breathtakingly aggressive straight sets performance that brilliantly showcased her absolute best, most intimidating tennis. The immediate, palpable, pulse-pounding stakes for this specific encounter on Court 3 are absolutely, unbelievably towering. This is where the American audience needs to lean in and listen closely. The ultimate winner of this brutal gladiatorial match does not merely secure a berth in the next round. They do not just get a standard bump in their ranking or a larger slice of the prize money. No, the winner of this absolute bloodbath secures the ultimate, most highly sought-after prize in American tennis right now. A potential, highly publicized, heavily televised, absolute blockbuster primetime showdown against the reigning, undisputed queen of American hard courts, the phenomenal, transcendent global superstar Coco Gauff. Assuming Gauff navigates her own treacherous, highly physical path in her respective match, the prospect of facing the American phenom on a marquee, brightly lit, massive stadium court here at Indian Wells is the absolute holy grail of the spring season. It offers massive, completely unprecedented global exposure, an electrifying, deafening, completely sold-out atmosphere, and the incredibly rare, highly coveted opportunity to pull off a career-defining, world-shocking upset on live television. For the 20-year-old Filipina prodigy, Alex Eala, a victory today is an absolutely crucial, completely non-negotiable stepping stone toward her heavily stated, deeply personal, and highly public goal of officially breaking into the elusive, highly exclusive, deeply prestigious top 30 of the world rankings. Achieving that monumental, historic milestone right here, right now, under the baking sun of the California desert would completely, undeniably solidify her status as one of the game's elite, top-tier, deeply feared contenders right before the entire tour packs its bags and transitions to the grueling, physically punishing, utterly exhausting European clay court season. For the veteran Ukrainian powerhouse, Dayana Yastremska, a massive statement-making win against a highly seeded, incredibly informed, brilliantly tactical player like Eala would be the ultimate, desperately needed, completely explosive catalyst. It would be the violent spark absolutely required to ignite a massive, unstoppable, runaway rankings climb back toward the prestigious top 20, where her sheer, undeniable, completely generational physical talent dictates she rightfully, undeniably belongs. This match is a massive defining crossroads for both of these incredible women. To accurately predict how this incredible stylistic clash will unfold, we must completely obsessively immerse ourselves in the highly specific, incredibly unique, almost alien physical dynamics of the Indian Wells tennis garden. The specific environmental conditions here play an absolutely massive, completely unavoidable, and totally dictatorial role in shaping the tactical narrative of every single match played on these grounds. The plexipave courts here are completely, utterly notorious. They are uniquely, specifically formulated with a highly abrasive, incredibly gritty silica sand that is heavily mixed into the top acrylic surface layer. This unique surface literally aggressively grips the fuzzy yellow tennis ball upon every single bounce, drastically, completely slowing down its forward horizontal velocity through the court. However, you absolutely must pair that extreme surface friction with the incredibly dry, thin, arid, high-altitude desert air of the Coachella Valley, which provides almost zero aerodynamic resistance. The bizarre, highly challenging result is that the ball flies incredibly rapidly off the racket strings through the thin air, but the exact moment it strikes the gritty court, the heavy topspin bites incredibly hard into the sand, and the ball violently, aggressively explodes vertically, kicking up high toward the players' shoulders and heads. This specific combination creates a highly unique, deeply challenging, intensely physical, high-bouncing environment that heavily, massively, and undeniably favors players who can meticulously, patiently construct long points with heavy, looping topspin, incredible, burning leg strength, and infinite, unwavering, absolute tactical patience. At the exact same time, because the ball sits up so incredibly high in the strike zone, it also heavily rewards the rare, fearless, incredibly coordinated shot makers who have the extraordinary hand-eye coordination and sheer bravery to violently step inside the baseline, take the ball exceptionally early on the aggressive rise, and violently rush their opponent before they can even attempt to recover their deep court positioning. This fascinating, deeply complex environmental duality perfectly, almost poetically, completely mirrors the totally contrasting, diametrically opposed styles of our two brilliant competitors today. Alexandra Eala is a stylistic, tactical maestro perfectly, almost genetically built for these exact grueling conditions. Armed with her heavy, violently whipping, incredibly heavily spun left-handed forehand, a stroke that is heavily, undeniably influenced by her formative years studying the exact meticulous biomechanics of Rafael Nadal, she absolutely, undeniably thrives in hot, slow environments where she can physically, systematically grind her opponents down to absolute dust. She will brilliantly look to completely absorb Yastremska's blinding, terrifying linear pace, use the incoming massive velocity entirely against her, and brilliantly creatively redirect the ball into vast, gaping open spaces of the massive court. Eala's defensive court coverage is absolutely spectacular, almost supernatural. She moves with a fluid, silent, incredibly efficient grace, beautifully sliding into her defensive squash shots on the extreme outer edges of the court. She is entirely, completely comfortable engaging in brutal, lung-busting, leg-burning, absolutely agonizing 15 to 20 shot rallies. Her entire overarching strategy is brilliantly built on slowly suffocating her opponent, violently dragging them into the deep, dark physical waters of the match, and coldly watching them drown in their own desperate, highly frustrated, unforced errors. Dayana Yastremska, residing on the completely totally opposite end of the vast tactical spectrum, is an unapologetic, terrifying baseline bomber. She is a player who demands, with absolute authority, to end the point strictly, entirely on her own aggressive terms, preferably within the first 3 or 4 violently, perfectly struck shots. She views long, drawn-out rallies not as a tactical opportunity, but as a complete failure of her own offensive aggression. Yastremska will be actively, hungrily looking to completely flatten out her massive ground strokes. She wants to hit directly, violently through the slow, gritty court, driving the ball with such immense, blinding, terrifying linear force that the abrasive surface does not even have the necessary time to affect the bounce. Her ultimate, uncompromising goal today is to violently, systematically take the racket completely out of Alexandra Eala's hands. She wants to make the brilliant young Filipina feel completely rushed, utterly panicked, totally out of breath, and entirely helplessly overwhelmed by the sheer, unadulterated velocity of the incoming tennis balls. The intense, suffocating, completely invisible psychological warfare between these two fierce, incredibly proud competitors will begin long before the chair umpire calls time, long before the crowd settles down, and long before the first actual ball is struck in anger. It begins right now, deep in the bowels of the stadium, in the pristine locker room. It continues down the long, shadowy tunnel. From the exact highly anticipated moment they walk out into the blinding, absolute California sunlight and step onto the blue expanse of Court 3, every single microscopic body language cue will be heavily, obsessively scrutinized by the opponent, the coaches, and the fans. Every aggressive, violent racket spin, every long, intimidating, icy stare across the net during the mandatory coin toss, the exact forceful way they bounce the ball before attempting their practice serves, all of it is a highly calculated, deeply intentional display of absolute alpha dominance. They have met only once before in their entire professional careers, but it was a deeply memorable, highly revealing, totally destructive clash in the quarterfinals of the prestigious Eastbourne International on the grass courts in England. On that slick, incredibly fast, completely unpredictable, low-bouncing surface, Alexandra Eala delivered what can only be accurately described as an absolute. She systematically, coldly dismantled the powerful Yastremska in straight, punishing, highly efficient sets, surrendering a mere 3 games in the entire match. It was a massive, profoundly historic victory, violently propelling Eala to become the first ever Filipina in history to reach a tour-level final. That specific, highly painful, deeply traumatic history casts a very long, very dark, absolutely inescapable shadow over today's highly anticipated encounter. Eala will draw an immense, unbreakable, endlessly deep well of absolute belief from knowing, without a single microscopic shadow of a doubt, that she possesses the precise, exact, proven tactical blueprint required to completely neutralize, absolutely disarm, and thoroughly embarrass Yastremska's terrifying, world-class firepower. Eala intimately knows that if she can consistently, relentlessly keep the ball deep, landing within mere inches of the baseline, if she can expertly, violently use her heavy biting, completely unique left-handed topspin to violently, repeatedly pin Yastremska deep in the ad-court backhand corner, and if she can brutally force the Ukrainian into exhausted, extended, physically demanding, lung-burning rallies, the unforced errors will inevitably, completely predictably flow like a massive, unstoppable river. She wants to deeply frustrate Yastremska. She wants to make her angry. She wants to make her desperately overhit. She wants to cleverly tempt her into going for impossible, microscopic, absolutely ridiculous targets near the outside sidelines that simply do not exist in reality. Dayana Yastremska, however, is a fiercely proud, incredibly stubborn, fiercely defiant competitor. You can absolutely positively guarantee, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that she has spent the entire last 24 hours meticulously, obsessively studying the painful videotape of that humiliating Eastbourne defeat. She has been sitting in her quiet hotel room in the desert, intensely analyzing precisely where her aggressive game plan completely broke down, and coldly, methodically plotting her absolute brutal physical revenge. She inherently deeply knows that she simply cannot, under any circumstances, afford to be passive, not even for a single fleeting point. She absolutely must be the ultimate, unquestioned dictator of the match tempo. She must step boldly, violently inside the baseline the very split second Eala hits a weaker second serve, treating that ball with absolute utter contempt, and aggressively imposing her sheer, undeniable physical will upon the entire match from the very first violent strike of the yellow ball. This specific, highly anticipated matchup is a breathtaking, completely mesmerizing microcosm of absolutely everything that makes professional women's tennis so utterly, overwhelmingly, completely captivating for American sports fans and massive global audiences alike. Professional tennis is the absolute ultimate, purest gladiator sport left on earth. It is a fiercely solitary, completely isolated endeavor where there are no strategic timeouts to save you, no coaching substitutions to bail you out, no teammates to pass the ball to, and absolutely unequivocally nowhere to hide your weaknesses. You are entirely terrifyingly alone with your spiraling, anxious thoughts, your deepest, darkest fears, your creeping, insidious doubts, and your sheer raw technical execution for hours on end. You are entirely, completely exposed to the brutal, unforgiving physical elements, the blinding heat, the swirling wind, the baking sun, and the totally unforgiving, highly vocal, completely immediate judgment of the thousands of passionate fans packed into the massive grandstands. And speaking directly of that crowd, let me tell you right now, the atmosphere actively pulsating through Court 3 today is going to be absolutely, positively, completely electric and deafening. The massive state of California proudly boasts a massive, incredibly passionate, fiercely loyal, deeply, deeply proud Filipino-American community, numbering well over 2 million strong, and they have been turning out to this tournament in massive, completely unprecedented, record-breaking droves to passionately support their absolute homegrown hero, Alex Eala. The massive grandstands completely surrounding Court 3 will be completely beautifully awash in the vibrant, striking red, blue, yellow, and white colors of the Philippine flag. You will physically hear the rhythmic, deafening, highly organized chanting. You will feel the roaring, earth-shaking applause for every single microscopic point she manages to win. It will actively create a highly vocal, incredibly supportive, intensely partisan, almost chaotic Davis Cup-like environment that will undoubtedly, absolutely provide the brilliant young Eala with a massive, surging, totally unstoppable injection of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. Dayana Yastremska, conversely, will be completely heavily embracing the highly difficult, deeply antagonistic, incredibly lonely role of the ultimate, absolute spoiler. She will be bravely stepping straight into heavily hostile territory, actively, violently trying to completely silence that massive roaring crowd with her own blistering, awe-inspiring, completely unplayable baseline winners. She will have to rely entirely, completely on her own immense, deeply cultivated, steel-forged internal fortitude to completely, utterly block out the deafening noise, the intense cheering actively rooting against her very survival, and the massive, suffocating pressure of the moment. It is a completely classic, utterly timeless, incredibly dramatic clash of completely distinct opposite styles, fascinating, highly complex personalities, and deeply compelling, totally divergent backgrounds. We have the absolute master tactician, the cerebral geometry expert, going up against the relentless, terrifying baseline bomber. We have the rising, brilliant, incredibly calm prodigy stepping into the ring versus the seasoned, dangerous, highly volatile powerhouse. With a potential, highly lucrative, career-defining date with the American superstar Coco Gauff hanging precariously, delicately in the balance, the raw, unadulterated tension actively thickening the dry desert air is absolutely, completely palpable. You can practically reach out and cut it with a knife. So I need every single one of you to settle in completely. Grab your morning coffee, pull your chair to the absolute edge of your seat, turn up the volume, and do not even think about changing the channel, because we are about to completely, meticulously break down, in granular, microscopic, highly technical detail, exactly how this phenomenal, deeply complex, utterly fascinating matchup will unfold over the next few, highly dramatic hours. We are going to aggressively explore the hidden tactical nuances, the deep, predictive statistical probabilities, the complex, highly specific biomechanics of their exact swings, and the deeply entrenched, highly volatile psychological battlegrounds that will ultimately, definitively, and absolutely determine who miraculously survives this grueling, unforgiving physical test on the burning Indian Wells hard courts, and who advances to the next, highly lucrative round. As we delve much, much deeper into the granular, highly technical, completely obsessive mechanics of this fascinating encounter, we absolutely, undeniably must start by completely, ruthlessly dissecting the raw, unfiltered numbers. Because the highly advanced analytics, the deep, predictive modeling, and the raw statistics painstakingly gathered from this current season tell a remarkably compelling, entirely undeniable, completely objective story about exactly where both of these incredible athletes currently stand in the ongoing evolution of their respective, highly complex games. Let us begin with the young, brilliant phenom. Alex Eala has rapidly, astonishingly, almost unbelievably evolved into a remarkably consistent, highly formidable, completely unshakable, absolute force of nature on the tour. When you sit down with the data and analytically, ruthlessly strip apart her service statistics so far this grueling season, you do not see the standard profile of a towering server who completely relies on sheer brute force and flat power. Instead, you see the highly sophisticated, incredibly intelligent profile of a player who has meticulously, mathematically, brilliantly engineered her entire game to completely withstand the most extreme, suffocating, completely paralyzing pressure imaginable. Eala has successfully, cleanly, and confidently held her serve in an incredibly impressive, highly elite 63.7% of her service games so far this entire year. Now, while she absolutely does not possess a towering, booming, 120-mile-per-hour flat first serve that magically generates massive amounts of cheap free points or completely unreturnable aces, what she does possess is infinitely, vastly more valuable on a slow, high-bouncing, highly abrasive hard court. She possesses unparalleled, absolute pinpoint placement, incredible, totally deceptive service disguise, and a very heavy, wildly kicking, violently biting left-handed slice serve that is an absolute nightmare to return. She brilliantly, repeatedly uses this incredibly specific, highly tailored serve to aggressively, violently drag her right-handed opponents entirely off the court, pushing them completely past the doubles alley and completely massively opening up the entire vast expanse of the open baseline for her absolutely lethal, violently struck, heavily spun first strike forehand down the line. It is a beautifully, perfectly orchestrated 1-2 punch that she executes with the cold, calculating precision of a master surgeon. But where Eala truly magnificently, undeniably separates herself from the vast majority of her professional peers is her astonishing, completely unbelievable performance while facing absolute, terrifying back-against-the-wall adversity. We are talking about her exact performance under extreme, match-defining, highly stressful duress. When facing a critical, absolutely terrifying breakpoint, a single point that could completely, irreversibly, and permanently shift the entire momentum of the set in the match, she has miraculously, incredibly managed to save an astonishing, completely elite, mind-boggling 50.5% of those breakpoints. I need you to let that specific number completely sink in for a moment. Over half the absolute time her back is completely against the wall, when the entire stadium is holding its collective breath, when her opponent is salivating at the chance to break, she completely escapes. That is a truly elite, deeply revealing, completely incredible metric. It speaks massive, undeniable volumes about her immense, totally unclouded mental clarity, her flat-out, stubborn refusal to ever panic when the metaphorical walls are violently closing in, and her absolute, completely unshakable, totally ingrained trust in her own elite physical conditioning and massive rally tolerance. When the score completely tightens, when the pressure becomes physically suffocating, Eala does not shrink from the massive moment. She aggressively physically digs her tennis shoes deep into the court grid. She noticeably lowers her center of gravity. She locks her eyes onto the ball, and she absolutely demands, with everything she has, that you hit a completely clean, completely perfect winner if you want to beat her. On the return side of the complex baseline equation, Eala has been incredibly, relentlessly aggressive and highly, totally effective, winning an outstanding, highly impressive 39.3% of her opponent's entire return games. And she is currently converting exactly 39% of the crucial breakpoints she systematically, brilliantly engineers. She absolutely, completely relies on her exceptional, lightning-fast, completely silent footwork to instantly, aggressively pressure the opposing server. She absolutely loves to step aggressively inside the court, take the incoming ball incredibly early on the high-rise on her two-handed backhand side, completely rob her panicked opponent of crucial, deeply needed recovery time, and immediately, violently put the server entirely on the frantic defensive from the very first, resounding strike of the ball. Now, let us completely pivot and heavily, drastically contrast this clinical, highly efficient, completely methodical efficiency with Dayana Yastremska's highly complex, completely volatile statistical profile. The Ukrainian's raw numbers this season deeply, profoundly, and undeniably reflect the extreme turbulence, the absolute chaos, and the wild, unpredictable inconsistency she has heavily experienced in her recent, highly frustrating tournament results. She has managed to win only an absolutely concerning 53% of her service games. In the modern, highly aggressive women's game, that is a highly problematic, deeply troubling, massive red flag of a statistic for a player whose entire, overarching professional identity and entire tactical framework is built completely and entirely around explosive, unanswerable offensive firepower. Her serve, which we have all witnessed firsthand, can be an absolute, totally unplayable, completely devastating weapon of mass destruction when it is firing perfectly on all cylinders, has been unfortunately heavily prone to incredibly costly, deeply ill-timed, totally momentum-killing double faults, and a drastically, concerningly dropping first serve percentage, the exact moment the matches get tight and the psychological pressure massively mounts. In her crucial return games, Yastremska trails the young Eala significantly in the season-long averages, boasting a highly concerning, incredibly low return win rate of just 31.1%. She often visibly struggles with her kinetic timing when intelligent players actively, repeatedly mix up the speeds, the spins, and the precise locations of their serves, leading to massive, deeply frustrating strings of completely unforced return errors directly into the bottom of the net or sailing long. However, I need you to listen to me very, very carefully right now, because there is one highly specific, absolutely crucial, potentially match-defining, completely terrifying metric where Dayana Yastremska actually holds a distinct, massive, undeniably terrifying advantage. And it is a metric that could absolutely single-handedly, completely dictate the entire final outcome of this epic clash today. Breakpoint conversion. When Dayana Yastremska manages, through sheer unadulterated force of will and raw power, to create a breakpoint opportunity on her opponent's serve, she converts that massive chance at a highly impressive, completely ruthless, utterly devastating 47.2% rate. What exactly does this deeply specific, highly terrifying number tell us? It tells us, without a doubt, that while she may not systematically, patiently create nearly as many total break opportunities as the highly clinical, perfectly methodical Eala, when she finally, eventually does get a clean look at a vulnerable, slightly short second serve on a crucial match-defining point, she becomes utterly, completely, terrifyingly ruthless. She does not hesitate for a microsecond. She does not doubt her ability. She violently, aggressively steps deep inside the baseline. She fully, completely uncoils her massive kinetic chain. She violently pulls the trigger, and she absolutely, totally punishes the tennis ball with everything she has. She plays breakpoints with a breathtaking, almost entirely reckless abandonment that can completely, permanently shatter an opponent's fragile confidence in a single, violently struck millisecond. The ultimate, deciding tactical battlefield on Court 3 today will be completely defined, completely dominated, and absolutely decided by two highly critical, extremely complex elements: complete control of court positioning and the masterful, highly intellectual management of extreme heavy spin versus blinding, totally flat linear pace. Eala's left-handedness is an absolutely massive, almost totally unfair, incredibly potent asset, particularly against a specific player like Yastremska, who deeply, desperately loves to fall into a comfortable, repetitive rhythm and heavily groove her powerful cross-court two-handed backhand. Eala will be continually, mercilessly, entirely purposely using her heavily spun, violently kicking, high-bouncing forehand to absolutely, totally pepper Yastremska's backhand wing. Let me be clear, Eala will absolutely not be aiming for clean, flat winners early in the rally. No, she will be meticulously, purposefully aiming to push the powerful Ukrainian incredibly high, totally wide and extremely deep, violently pushing her backward, totally off balance, entirely into the very green fences of the stadium perimeter. By brilliantly, expertly utilizing the highly gritty, high-friction, totally abrasive surface of the Indian Wells courts, Eala's extreme heavy topspin will aggressively, violently bite incredibly hard into the ground and dramatically, explosively jump up violently toward Yastremska's shoulders and neck area. This specific, highly calculated trajectory completely, totally takes the incoming ball entirely out of the Ukrainians' ideal, comfortable waist-high strike zone. The ultimate, unwavering goal for the highly intelligent young Filipina is to consistently, repeatedly, relentlessly force Yastremska to hit completely off her back foot, leaning dangerously backward, completely, totally off balance, thereby instantly, completely draining the massive, terrifying pace from her ground strokes and completely, systematically, totally neutralizing her absolute terrifying power. Eala knows deep in her fiercely competitive heart that she possesses the vastly undeniably superior cardiovascular fitness, the absolutely unmatched marathon runner lung capacity, and the sheer blinding incredible foot speed to aggressively, tirelessly run down 2, 3, or even 4 extra impossible balls every single grueling point. She will be highly, supremely, totally content to happily engage in brutal, lung-busting, leg-burning, absolutely agonizingly long 15 to 20 shot rallies. Essentially, completely daring Yastremska to go for microscopic, totally impossible lines that simply do not exist, and subsequently watching the highly frustrated, totally exhausted Ukrainian rack up a massive, completely insurmountable tally of unforced errors directly into the net or flying deep beyond the baseline. For Dayana Yastremska, the absolute tactical imperative, the completely non-negotiable game plan, is entirely diametrically the exact opposite. She simply, absolutely, under no circumstances, cannot afford to get slowly, inevitably sucked into Eala's suffocating, hypnotic, completely exhausting web of high heavy spin and endless grueling, totally defensive baseline grinding. If she willingly gets into a physical marathon track meet with the incredibly fit Eala in the 90-degree desert heat, she will absolutely, unequivocally lose the match. Yastremska must, without any question or hesitation, establish absolute, uncompromising, totally terrifying dominance of the absolute center of the court from the very first, completely flat ball of the 5-minute warm-up. When Eala inevitably drops a single ball even slightly, microscopically short of the deep baseline, Yastremska has to completely recognize the massive opportunity instantaneously. She has to aggressively, violently step entirely inside the baseline, take the ball purely, perfectly on the early rise before the heavy spin takes full violently kicking effect, completely flatten out her racket face, and drive the ball completely flat, incredibly hard, and terrifyingly fast straight down the unprotected line. She absolutely has to use her immense, completely elite physical strength and massive core rotation to physically violently hit completely through the heavy, slow, highly resistant Indian Wells air, and systematically, totally take the absolute most precious, highly vital commodity in professional tennis, completely away from the highly cerebral young Filipina. Time. Furthermore, Yastremska absolutely, completely has to heavily, mercilessly, and aggressively target Eala's vulnerable second serve. Eala's second serve, while incredibly consistently placed with excellent kicking spin, can occasionally, periodically lack truly penetrating, deep, completely pushing depth. If Yastremska can brilliantly, perfectly read the service toss, totally tee off on those vulnerable, slightly floating second deliveries, and immediately, violently put Eala sprinting desperately, defensively into the deep corners on the very first shot of the rally, she can successfully, completely prevent those exhausting, lung-burning, totally draining rallies from ever developing in the first place. We also absolutely have to deeply, comprehensively, and totally analyze their highly contrasting recent form, leading precisely, exactly into this exact incredibly high-pressure moment in the baking California desert. Alex Eala's massive campaign has been an absolute, totally undeniable masterclass in steady, highly methodical, completely brilliant, entirely undeniable progression. She has been meticulously, brick by brick, building her entire overall game like an impenetrable, completely unassailable fortress. Coming off a completely spectacular, massively confidence-boosting, totally brilliant semi-final run in Auckland, Eala brilliantly, seamlessly translated that raw massive confidence directly into the highly competitive, totally loaded Middle Eastern swing. In Abu Dhabi, she completely showcased her remarkable, undeniable physical and mental growth by safely securing highly impressive, totally dominant victories before finally, totally falling to the sheer overwhelming, completely unplayable flat power of her final opponent there. But she absolutely didn't let that single, totally understandable loss deter her for a moment. She boldly, aggressively carried that exceptional, completely elite form straight into the highly prestigious, incredibly loaded, absolutely massive Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships, putting together a truly magnificent, completely career-defining, utterly spectacular run. Eala systematically, completely dismantled her early round opponents. She then completely outplayed, totally outthought, and completely outmaneuvered incredible, highly ranked veterans. She finally ran out of absolute physical gas in the massive quarterfinals against the incredibly athletic, completely transcendent American phenom, Coco Gauff, in a highly physical, deeply entertaining, totally exhausting match. Through these massive, highly lucrative tournaments, Eala has proven, repeatedly, loudly, and totally undeniably over the last 2 totally grueling months, that she absolutely, unequivocally, without a doubt belongs on the exact same massive stadium court with the world's very best, most totally elite, highly ranked players. She is no longer just a promising, highly touted, incredibly gifted young junior talent with merely potential. She has absolutely arrived. She is a highly established, incredibly dangerous, absolutely top-tier threat to anyone she ever faces. Dayana Yastremska's deeply winding, incredibly arduous, totally exhausting path to the second round of Indian Wells has been vastly, completely different, and significantly, painfully, absolutely more frustrating. Before arriving in the dry, totally unforgiving California desert, she painfully endured 4 deeply agonizing, highly frustrating, completely totally demoralizing first-round exits across multiple events. This painful streak included a deeply disappointing, highly emotional, totally crushing early departure at the absolute biggest event of the early season, the first major in Australia. Her absolute best, completely isolated performance of the young season came way back in the opening, totally early weeks at the Brisbane event in early January, where she managed to bravely battle her way to reach the 3rd round before finally, totally falling in a grueling, highly physical, completely exhausting 3-set war of absolute total attrition. This completely devastating, highly demoralizing string of early, painful, totally exhausting losses across the globe has undoubtedly, heavily, absolutely dented her highly fragile, totally crucial confidence. It severely tests a professional player's absolute resolve to constantly travel the globe, practice endlessly for hours, and continuously, repeatedly lose in the opening rounds. However, her opening round performance right here at Indian Wells against the veteran Zhang Shuai was a massive, desperately needed, completely reviving breath of fresh, totally cool desert air. She looked like a entirely totally different player on the court. She confidently, powerfully won a highly impressive, completely dominant majority of her absolute first serve points. She hit her incredibly tight, completely microscopic spots cleanly, moving the massive ball beautifully around the exact edges of the service box, and she completely, utterly, violently dominated the brutal, heavy baseline exchanges with her absolute trademark, completely terrifying total aggression. That specific, massively confidence-boosting match proved unequivocally, entirely, without a doubt that when Dayana Yastremska finally finds her elusive, completely crucial rhythm, when she finally totally feels the tennis ball perfectly, completely cleanly on the absolute center of the strings, the previous totally painful weeks of bad form, deep doubt, and heavy frustration immediately, entirely, completely evaporate into thin, dry air. She is the absolute ultimate, supreme, totally completely dominant momentum player on the entire tour. When she is totally hot, she is completely, entirely, undeniably unplayable. And that single totally dominant, extremely aggressive victory might be absolutely entirely all the explosive, complete spark she desperately needed to completely reignite her entire frustrating season and make a massive, devastating, completely, totally terrifying run right here in California. When you meticulously completely factor in their singular, highly revealing, totally specific previous meeting, the absolute demolition of Yastremska at Eastbourne, the underlying highly complex psychological dynamic of today's massive match becomes incredibly, endlessly, totally fascinating. Eala will confidently, totally aggressively step onto court 3 today, completely bathed in the hot California sun, with the absolute, unshakable, completely total certainty that her absolute best, completely locked-in tennis is more than entirely enough to completely, systematically, absolutely, totally neutralize and entirely dismantle Yastremska's biggest, most highly dangerous, totally terrifying weapons. She has the exact blueprint. She absolutely knows it completely works. However, we must heavily, crucially, and totally caveat that specific statistical history. That massive match at Eastbourne was played on incredibly slick, extremely low-bouncing, totally lightning-fast, completely unpredictable grass courts. That specific, totally unique surface massively, totally disproportionately rewards Eala's incredibly low, totally skidding, heavily cut defensive slice, which makes it incredibly agonizingly, completely difficult for a player with extreme, totally heavy grips like Yastremska to properly, completely set up, drop her heavy racket head, and hit the fast ball with clean, heavy, totally upward aggressive power. Grass completely, totally, absolutely neuters the Ukrainians' massive strike zone. Indian Wells, however, is a completely, entirely, absolutely different, totally alien universe. The extraordinarily high, incredibly slow, violently, totally kicking bounce of this highly gritty, totally sandpaper-like hard court will give Dayana Yastremska significantly, massively more precious, entirely vital time to rapidly, completely set her feet, perfectly, entirely load up her massive, completely powerful kinetic chain through her strong legs and heavy core, and violently, completely unleash her massive, terrifyingly powerful, totally destructive ground strokes. It will also, unfortunately, definitely make Eala's highly defensive slice slightly, completely less effective, as the extreme heavy friction of the court will cause the sliced ball to sit up slightly, entirely higher in the thin air, essentially providing an absolute sitting target for the powerful Ukrainian to brutally crush. The tactical adjustments required today from both camps are monumental, intricate, and totally game-changing. The advanced predictive models, the absolute state-of-the-art analytics, currently heavily favor Eala today, giving her the mathematical edge. But in the volatile, highly unpredictable, totally emotional realm of professional tennis, data and cold hard probabilities can only tell us so much of the story. They simply cannot account for the sheer, unadulterated adrenaline rush of a massive, roaring, totally deafening crowd. They absolutely cannot calculate the raw, unyielding, entirely visceral desperation of a veteran player looking to rescue a struggling, rapidly fading season. If Yastremska walks out onto that blistering hot court, finds her exact devastating range early, and starts violently painting the outer lines with absolute blinding, totally terrifying power, she has the raw, unmatched athletic capability to take the racket entirely out of Eala's hands and absolutely blast her way into the third round. But if the young Filipina can brilliantly, calmly weather the early violent storm, extend the brutal rallies past that crucial 4-shot mark, and consistently, repeatedly inject her heavy, high-bouncing left-handed spin into the complex equation, she will completely, systematically dismantle the Ukrainians' fragile rhythm and punch her golden ticket to that absolute blockbuster showdown with Coco Gauff. The sun is beating down, the shadows are lengthening, the massive crowd is absolutely buzzing with electric, undeniable anticipation, and the umpire is ready to call play. This is a clash of absolute, totally contrasting philosophies. The ultimate master tactician versus the ultimate baseline bomber. The rising, totally brilliant prodigy versus the seasoned, extremely dangerous powerhouse. The tension in the hot desert air is thick, palpable, and totally intoxicating. You are witnessing the absolute pinnacle of the sport right here, right now. Do not take your eyes off the screen for a single second. The epic, unforgettable battle for survival in the desert of Indian Wells begins right now.